Hello everyone, welcome back to the LuNami Bin. My name is Looney. If I looked a little bit tired, I am. I've been working all day and I just recently got home. But I did want to make a video discussing this specifically because it's a kind of a, good moment for LuNami shippers, aka Luffy Nami shippers. And it comes from something that happened in the most recent chapter of One Piece. Now that the official chapter came out of One Piece 1123, and I did make a I wouldn't say brief, like a 10-minute commentary about it in my recent chapter analysis, review, talk video about the recent chapter. And I wanted to make a separate video to give you a little bit more of my own thoughts, and just explain and enhance more of like some of the ideas I mentioned in there. And I do want to point out that over the course of many years that Oda has done One Piece, his writing has changed. I think his writing has developed and matured over the years, especially compared to pre-time skip and post-time skip. Now, whether or not it's good, it's all dependent on you, the reader themselves, about what you prefer, which, post-time skip or pre-time skip you prefer, which one you prefer more so than the other. But I think one of the big factors that Oda has showcased post-time skip is the idea of romance. I understand romance in general in One Piece, especially between the Straw Hat Pirates, is like, taboo. It's forbidden among a lot of different people in the community, right? Aside from shippers, a lot of people don't talk about romance in One Piece, and I think that's kind of discredit and kind of like goes, it kind of discredits Oda's writing in terms of like romance, in general, because he has improved in that, department. In post-time skip, we have seen more and more different depictions of romance, whether it's, married couples, whether it's flashbacks of certain characters, with a romantic partner. We've seen it over and over in the post-time skip where he has changed his mind about inserting romance into One Piece. I'm not saying or telling you, the ones who don't like romance in One Piece, to think that there's going to be something with the Straw Hats. I personally believe that Oda has written more romantic undertones within the Straw Hats that I think really help the development that could lead to something more at the end. I truly believe that. Do I believe there could be pairings at the end of One Piece? I believe it can. And I think a lot of the things that made me more confident in that idea that he would is simply because of these small romantic undertones he has. Now, this is specifically going to be discussing LuNami, because I think a lot of the more romantic undertones are with them. And I think a lot of it comes from just the little subtle things that he inserts within every arc. I understand some people might not agree, and that's perfectly fine. But I do want to go and touch on to these little subtle things because we see it again in the most recent chapter. Now, over the course of the post-time skip, we constantly see Nami more worried about Luffy. This is in part due to, what happened in Marineford, what happened with Ace. Because Nami understood his pain probably more so than anyone. And I know all the Straw Hats have lost somebody very important to them, right? They all did. I could be mistaken, so, let me know if I am. But I believe Nami's the only one who understood Luffy in that moment, because her mother was shot right in front of her. Luffy's brother, Ace, was killed right in front of him. And I think they have that sort of connection to each other that she can understand what he went through, and that's why she wanted to go see him, along with the other Straw Hats. But she specifically was seen crying and, constantly being worried as the post-time skip happen. And it comes from that. She's afraid of people dying. She's afraid of losing people, right? The same way with Luffy is now, where he's afraid of losing people. Shibodi, Marineford affecting him in that way. And that's probably one of, their worst fears. Both of them have that fear. And it's because of what happened to people who were very important to them. And because of that, you see Nami be a little bit more, or in fact, a lot more worried about Luffy's well-being. You see it in Fishman Island, right? When Luffy is fighting Hody up with Noah's Ark and Shirahoshi. She looks up, she whispers his name. She looks worried. She is not frantically worried, but she's worried about his well-being. Like, are you okay? Then we see it more as we continue. We see a little bit of it in Punk Hazard, right? We see a little bit in Dressrosa. Then we see it more so in WCI. We see it more in Zoe. Then we even see it more in Wano, where she is constantly, and even Egghead, where she is constantly asking about his well-being. Like, where is Luffy? How is Luffy? Where do you know where Luffy is? She's asking all these people, right? Then we have that moment where she's yelling at Kaido because Kaido told everyone, there that Luffy has died, and she refused to believe that. It's these type of subtle things that showcase the very, very small chance that Oda's taking that sort of romance into a much more, much more important level to the story, right? It just feels that way, especially if you are a LuNami fan, like a Luffy Nami fan. If you're not, you probably don't necessarily think it should be seen as anything more than friends being worried, for their friend. I know there's also the sibling allegations, but sibling allegations usually, whenever it comes to shipping, it most of the time just is one of the weakest arguments you can have for a ship, because it's a way for people to just deny a ship without actually just saying, it's not going to happen. Because at the end of the day, sibling arguments is their best counter to try to prevent anything happening between these two characters. It's why they don't say friends. Because if they say friends, there's always an inkling within, that friendship that could blossom into something more. And the sibling argument, anytime someone says it, it really holds no value to me as someone who not only ships One Piece, but ships a lot of other, characters from other anime, from other manga, right? And it's always a defense mechanism. It's always a way to try to find ways to, scrutinize or, deny a ship no matter what, which is why I don't, take it at face value. And you see it constantly within post-time skip, where she is constantly worried. In the most recent, arc, Egghead, we see her constantly asking about Luffy's whereabouts. When Vegapunk was talking to Nami, Sanji, Robin, Frankie, and I think Usopp, about, Sun God Nika, his devil fruit ability. You could see, this is especially, you see it more in the anime, where she is worried about, like, all this new information. Like, is Luffy going to be okay? Like, did, all this time, they all thought this was the Gomu Gomu no Mi, but now Luffy's considered a Zoan fruit, a god, essentially. And, that it showcased in the anime that it made her a little worried. Now, I understand that, you can consider that as filler, which is, that's understandable, because you don't necessarily see that kind of worry shown in the manga, but you do see certain panels that showcase just like how surprised she is about all this. But then you also see when she is away from Luffy, you constantly see her, and this is also in Wano, where she asks others about, do you know where Luffy is? How is Luffy doing? Is Luffy with you? Constantly. It would be normal if she constantly asks for the other Straw Hats, but surprisingly, it's mostly she always asks about him. That could be in part to, her being extremely worried, either as a friend or maybe something more, right? And then we see in chapter 1123 where she, Luffy just ran out of gas, ran out of energy. He falls down. I assume he falls flat down onto the Thousand Sunny, and Nami runs over to check in on him. And, we were all essentially greeted with a panel showcasing that Luffy was on Nami's lap. And, anyone who knows about shipping or like romance or anything like that, resting somebody on someone's lap specifically can sometimes be a very romantic trope. It could be a very romantic idea, right? And it can be seen that way. Now, granted, Oda tends to try and not, showcase like, anything with a romantic undertone without using some sort of gag or some sort of serious moment, like with the hug in Zoe, and especially something like this where Luffy just looks like an old man, right? But it showcases that worry You know, it showcases Nami constantly being worried about Luffy's well-being, and that's in part due to what happened, like I said, with Marineford, and you know, with her own past trauma, and you know, Luffy is a very important person to her, as well as you know, he's also very important to those other Strats. But we see it with her, you know, constantly be worried about his well-being post time skip, and that's the point. You know, a lot of people try to, you know, argue that this isn't really a shipping moment, you know, because you know, wow, you know, Luffy's on, you know, Nami's lap or whatever, and you know, it's not a big deal. But it comes with everything else that has happened post time skip, where she is constantly being worried about his well-being, and this just, you know, is another essentially nail to that idea, or maybe not necessarily a nail, or you know, just another branch that, you know, grows out of a tree to this idea that she is just constantly worried about his well-being. Now, granted, like I said many times before, Oda's writing is very genius in a way, especially with character relationships, especially with the Straw Hats, right? Where a lot of things that happen could just be them, you know, showcasing their friendship, could just be them, you know, being very, very good friends. Not sibling coded or family coded, because Found Family isn't, you know, sibling coded, or, you know, I know, understand that some people don't think that way, that they're not actually siblings, but they, you know, act like siblings. To me, I have siblings. I don't see us acting in that same way, right? The same way Luffy and Nami do. And a lot of that, you know, probably could also come from people who don't also have siblings. Now, you know, you could also have not have any siblings and know that that's not how siblings, you know, interact, right? That's perfectly understandable. But I think that's where most of that, you know, issues come from, as well as just trying to deny a ship because of rivalship or something like that, right? But it's just the constant repetitiveness, you know, of Nami constantly being worried about Luffy's well-being. It is shown post time skip, and I think that is important. I think in terms of Luffy Nami, you're not going to necessarily get those big romantic things like, you know, Hancock, you know, does with Luffy, or Sanji does with, you know, most of the female characters in One Piece. You're not going to get that with Luffy and Nami, right? You're not going to necessarily see that, but what you do get are those emotional values, those emotional impacts, those ideas about them caring about each other, to the point where it just constantly, like Oda constantly keeps it going to mostly all of the post time skip arcs, right? And it's something that us Luffy Nami shippers tend to look at and tend to see more in a romantic undertone. And it's very well possible. Like, even Oda has done things like, you know, gave good, really interesting comments in the Usopp Gallery. He approved and actually read a spin-off story about, you know, a slice of life romantic manga where the main characters are Luffy and Nami, and he approves. He, you know, constantly supposedly read it every week, right? And left comments that he gave to the editor to tell her. To tell the author. So it's not that we think it's, you know, all of this is like really romantic and like it's supposed to be seen as romantic. It's that the hidden messages, not necessarily hidden messages, but the subtlety of it. The only reason why I'm struggling is because I'm struggling to say the word. But like, it's subtle, and that's what is important, because there is a thing called slow burn. We will see if it continues. We will see if there's more, right? We will see if maybe Oda decides to go much more, you know, non-subtle route and be a little and showcase a little bit more, you know, romantic undertone in terms of their relationship, or he could not. We don't know, but it's the idea, the repetitiveness, the constant, you know, her worried about his well-being, that is why we enjoy what happened in that one single panel, right? It's why we were happy. It's why we celebrated it. And I think it's perfectly fine. Shippers are allowed to celebrate those little moments, you know? Who cares if you think that it's not romantic, or like, it doesn't really matter, right? Because you could have something very similar. If you're a rival ship and you had that same moment, you would be jumping for joy too, you know? That is hypocrisy. And that's why it's always weird to me that people try to deny it, right? And anytime something happens with Luffy Nami that a lot of people, are happy and celebration for, we get flack for it, we get hate for it constantly, especially on social media. So it's not that we think it basically confirms Luffy Nami as canon, but it showcases Oda's romantic subtlety in how he's writing in post time skip. We also see countless of couples in post time skip like Oda and Kanemo, Ginny and Kuma, that almost resemble similar things to Luffy Nami. It's something that constantly is shown, and that's important because the more you repeat something, it's no longer coincidence, it's a pattern, and it's done on purpose. And who knows what will happen in Elbaf, who knows what will happen past Elbaf, the rest of the story, but I do believe that Oda is slow burning this type of relationship between these two characters. And like I said, his writing is very good in that you could think of it as just being friends, right? To not make it too obvious. But if he decides to take that next step, then all the moments that they had, those moments can be used to showcase why that relationship works, right? And if he decides not to, guess what? They're still very good friends, and you can infer if he, leaves it, open-ended, that's why it's important. That's why we were happy about it. That's why we really liked it, because at the end of the day, it's a pattern, it's subtle, and there's always the possibility that he could go that route. And that's what to us is important. So thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. It was a very fun panel. I really had fun celebrating with my fellow Luffy Nami shippers. And yeah, I mean, I understand people have different ships, but I think this is a really good, cool moment for Luffy Nami shippers, and they should celebrate it. Just like any other shipper, if they get a cool moment, celebrate it as well. Be happy with your moments. So thank you so much for watching. Please like the video, comment, and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more of my shipping, Luffy Nami videos, One Piece videos, and such. So thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you guys next time.